Afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Schemel Forum, generously sponsored by Monday Law. I'm George Alicio, Director of the Schemel Forum, and I'm thrilled by today's record turnout. Your attendance underscores our collective desire to engage in vital discussions about ensuring access to essential, high-quality news foundational to our society. As our local newspaper shifts from family to corporate hands, we face a pivotal moment to reassess and reinforce the integrity of local news and civic participation. Fortunately, there are many new models of journalism and several key players stepping up to help support the cause. We are privileged to host Jeff Jarvis today, a visionary in journalism innovation. Jeff's distinguished career includes his tenure as Tao Professor of Journalism Innovation at City University of New York, founding editor of Entertainment Weekly, and he's held key roles at the San Francisco Examiner and the Chicago Tribune. Jeff's dedication extends beyond journalism into a deep commitment to education and local community engagement, as demonstrated through his interactions with University of Scranton undergraduates yesterday, as well as meeting with several representatives from WVIA last night. At that meeting, I was heartened to hear about the good work that is happening in our area and the various ways WVIA is further expanding its news division. Jeff, thank you for sharing your insights and time with us, a testament to your commitment to nurturing journalism and enhancing local news ecosystems. So without further ado, please help me welcome Jeff Jarvis so that we can reimagine the future of local journalism.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to see a full room. If you come here thinking that I'm going to give you the solution to news in Scranton, you can leave now because I don't have it. But I think you all will. And that's what I hope we end up with, is discussing that. I have had an amazing day and a half in your wonderful fair city where I got to talk to journalism students yesterday and last night with WVIA, thanks to Carla McCabe. And I see a lot of excitement and a lot of possibility there. And this morning, George Lynette and I had coffee, and then I got to tour, thanks to George, the now empty headquarters of the Times Tribune, which was hard for him, but inspiring for me. And I'm grateful for that. And grateful for the model that you've given to the community of trying to stand for the community here at a time of need. So let me start here. Alden is pardon me for my language, in a Jesuit school shit show. And I've seen it firsthand. I was on the digital advisory board for Digital First Media when it had a CEO who was trying to innovate. When the innovation didn't end up with a sale of the whole company, Alden said, to hell with innovation, to hell with investment. My friend left, the other good people left, and now it just milks the cows until they fall over in the field. And that's what you're going to have here. So this is a crisis for Scranton. And I think that the question for all of you as leaders in this city is how the city can rise to the crisis and what you can do. And I'm, especially after my 24 hours in Scranton, everybody here asked, you ever been to Scranton before? So no, I hadn't been. So this is my virgin voyage here. But especially after the conversations I've had, I'm very optimistic for what's possible here. In fact, I think this could be an amazing laboratory for a new future for news, but it's going to take a lot of effort. So let me do a little bit of history. I got to plug it. I wrote a book called The Gutenberg Parenthesis, on sale now. And so I looked back at the history of print all the way to Gutenberg. And you're probably thinking now, oh my God, he's starting with Gutenberg. This is never going to end. Well, it starts in 1450. We only have a half a millennium to go. But I want to make a point here that the things that we think are forever aren't. They were invented, they were created, and they can be recreated at any time. So a quick timeline. 1450, Gutenberg is printing the Bible, comes off the press in 1454. And for the next half a millennium, pardon me, my pocket here, most of you can't see this, but I'm holding up a piece of type. It's amazing to me that for 500 years, every word in every language, on every page around the world was set one damned letter at a time, right? It's just amazing to me that that's how that operated. So that happened around 1454, and with movable type. 1500, the book started taking on the shape we know now, because Gutenberg was just automating what was the scribal book. And the attributes of the book that we now know as the modern book, titles, title pages, page numbers, indexes, or indices if you prefer, and paragraph indentations came along about 1500, at the end of the incunabular or infant phase of print. By then, by the way, this new business of print was a disaster. It was in shambles. Too much money had been poured in, and the market was flooded with the ancients' works. And the printers were desperate. They had warehouses filled with books they could not sell. And then, guess who came along to reward them and change the business of print? Again, I say this with caution in a Jesuit university, but along came Martin Luther. And the Reformation and Counter-Reformation caused a huge surge in print, and also a 30 Years' War and other problems as we went, but it did that. So now, we're now at 1500, 50 years on. Fast forward to 1600, a few years either side, and we suddenly see a tremendous amount of innovation with print. We see the invention of the essay with Montaigne, the invention of the modern novel with Cervantes, the invention of a market for printed plays with Shakespeare, and the invention of the newspaper in 1605 in Strasbourg. Go forward another century to 1710, that's when we finally get a business model for print in copyright. The Statute of Anne in the UK. Another century, see I told you this would be fast. Another century on, 1800, we see the first innovation with the technology of print. It basically stayed the same, one letter at a time, for all that time. But around 1800, we got the invention of stereotyping, which enabled you to make copies of pages easily, and steam-powered presses. And I'm delighted to be in this town where we can talk about this. It's Steam Town and Electric City. And I think you just pick one or the other, but fine. But it's appropriate to this topic because it was steam and electricity, of course, that changed printing and media immensely and led to scale and the mass media and the mass media business model. The steam-powered rotary press, the linotype, the manufacture of paper from wood, and so on, enabled an entirely new industry of mass media. But that's pretty recent. It was only in 1893 when Frank Muncie's magazine dropped his price from 25 cents to 10 cents, sold every copy at a loss, and made it up on advertising. That's the invention of the modern media business model. That's the invention of the attention economy, which still corrupts the internet to this day. Fast forward again to the 1920s and we get radio. And by the way, newspapers hated radio. They tried to keep radio out of the news business. They forced upon the networks the Biltmore Agreement, which said that radio would not be allowed to have news reports except twice a day, 5 minutes each, after the papers were off the press, with news only from the newspaper's wire service. Not allowed to have advertising, couldn't be profitable, couldn't be sustainable. And my favorite part of this, that commentators on air were not allowed to discuss any event in the news until 12 hours afterwards. Newspaper people, pardon me, can be jerks. And so what happened though? Well, illuminated, smart publishers realized that they needed to get into the new technology, as happened at Shamrock. And there's a tower over the building now because there's radio there. And there was going to be television, I learned today, or a dream of television. The smart ones got into new media. The dumb ones didn't. Fast forward again to 1950s, we had television. And I was a child of television. I then became a TV critic. And then we fast forward to the internet today. What I left out, of course, was the web coming in 1994. We are only about a third of a century past the invention of the web. That is to say, in Gutenberg years, it's about 1480. It's early still. We don't know what the internet is yet. We still see the future in the analog of the past. We still think of books and magazines and newspapers and TV shows and podcasts as radio shows online as a form of what they were. We haven't yet, I think, really figured out what it can be. And now along comes AI, which really screws with our heads, because content is now a commodity. I think I'm special because I'm a writer. Well, I'm not so special, because now there's a machine that can write sometimes better than I can, right? And what does that mean for the value of what we do? Well, I argue that journalism must stop seeing itself as a factory making a commodity we call content. Instead, journalism must realize that it is first and foremost a service, and a service to the communities in which it operates that is beholden to those communities. And so that's the context in which I think that we go forward in Scranton. So I tell this to my students every year when we start the program. I point to them and I say, you must reinvent journalism. I'm too old. I won't see how this turns out. But the students have the opportunity and the responsibility to learn what we teach them and then question everything we teach them. Don't throw it all out, but ask, how did we get here? And you usually follow the money as the answer to how we got to where we got in this business. So I think there is an opportunity here in Scranton, honest to God, to rethink fundamentally a community and its news. Now, I'm delighted to see everything that WVIA is doing. It's in great hands with Carla, and in turn with her staff. They're imaginative, they're strategic, they're enthusiastic, but they're small. How many people, George, did the paper have in the newsroom at its top?
At its top, it had probably 90,
right.
Late 90s.
Carla, how many do you have in your new burgeoning newsroom?
We're about to have
11.
11.
Okay. How many counties are you covering?
22.
How many counties did you cover?
1.
Yeah. Okay. So I point over here to they can't do it alone. Impossible. Right? And so what do? I think we have this opportunity here. I say we, I feel like I've been here for 24 hours. I feel like I'm a Scrantonian now. Yeah. I don't know what my wife would say, but you in this town have a need and an opportunity to reinvent news. So what I want to do is talk about a few possibilities, but then I really want to come around the room. And what I want to hear more than anything else from you is, what are the needs of Scranton? It starts there. It doesn't start with the story ideas we have. It doesn't start with the products we already made. It starts with the needs of this community. I'll correct that. These communities. Because there is no one single community. It is a collection of communities that interact, sometimes clash with friction, and how does that operate? So a few big ideas before we get down to earth. One is, I think you need to see yourself in an ecosystem of news. Now, other communities already have a lot of blogs and Nextdoor and those kinds of services. I hear you don't have that much here. But why not help build it? That was one of the ideas last night at the table, was why not help build an independent ecosystem of news in the community? That if somebody wants to cover something, help them do it. Help students and train them in the university to be able to do this. So I think it's very important to think about collaboration as the structure for news. They cannot do it on their own. They're going to have to work with others. If the paper already is not here in the form it was, right? So who else is there to work with? How else can you imagine making the news? As I said, I think it's vital that whatever it is about service over content, is about serving the community and judging the success or failure as to how well the community is served. And the communities are going to judge that rather than you. It's also important, oftentimes in communities, I'll stretch here so I can drive the camera guy crazy and walk around. I also think it's important to consider the repair that must be done. That in any community, in any city, there have been communities that have not been represented. Let's be honest here, most newspapers are run by people who look like me, old white men. And what the internet has done that excites me so greatly is that it has enabled voices who've always been there but were not heard to finally be heard. And that is why some people resent that and don't want that change. But that is the essence of democracy and community, and we need to embrace the diversity that comes with hearing many voices. That cacophony is I think, democracy. Now, I argue in my book, the Gutenberg parenthesis on sale now, that the early days of print, before print, society was conversational. That's how we operated. That's how we knew who was telling the truth and who wasn't, was conversation and judgment and knowing people. Print comes along and kind of ruins that, especially when it comes to the mechanization and industrialization of print, to steam and electricity. And that took away this nature of the conversation in media and community, I think. So how do we recapture that? How do we connect communities back together? And I think that's what we see on the internet. And we have, as a society, we have lost practice in holding conversation. We are really bad at it. But we have to relearn that skill together. That doesn't mean that we have to listen to every jerk or conspiracy theory. It doesn't mean that we tolerate ourselves everything. Instead, what it means is that there's all kinds of they're not new voices. There's voices who were not heard. There's talent that couldn't get through that is now available out there. And so the job, I think, is to find it and give it attention and bring it to the fore. When Harper's Magazine started in 1850, I have another book called Magazine, also on sale now, both from Bloomsbury. I was fascinated to look at Harper's Magazine's response to the mechanization and industrialization of print and the new abundance of speech that came. Harper's said in the first page of its first issue that its role was curatorial. Its role was to help find the best that was out there because there was so much and it was so difficult to do that. I can see I'm driving some of you crazy by walking behind you, so I won't do that now. I'll go back here. We'll do that in question time. So where is the Harper's of 1850 for today? Where is that ability to go find the good stuff? I'm not talking about algorithms that are tuned for engagement and anger. I'm not talking about AI that makes more and more and more content. I'm simply talking about valuing quality, artistry, authority, experience, expertise. It's out there. These voices are online, they're out there, and they can be encouraged. But, as I say, there's a lack of trust that requires repair. The Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, in a recent report, says that a third of people worldwide are now actively avoiding news. And we can understand that, can't we? Because it gets to be too much. The levels of trust in news have fallen to record lows. The last record was 2016, and it's back there. Now, obviously, that is an asymmetric measurement. Right now, the lack of trust is far more on the right than on the left, but nonetheless, it's down on both, and it's down. So we have to repair something here. We're not trying to regain trust, we're trying to build trust. And that begins, more than anything else, with listening. And that's the thing that I have learned teaching, is how important it is to listen in ways that journalists did not listen. We tended to go to communities with a story idea already in head, and then we take out our notebook and we extract quotes from people for the narrative we have in mind. We come back and we write it. And the storyteller, we love to think of ourselves as storytellers. But the storyteller is a position of power. I decide what the story is. I decide who's in it. I decide what they get to say. I decide how it ends. And people can often resent that. But now people have the ability to tell their own stories. I even theorized about how they could use generative AI to help them tell their stories or illustrate their stories. That we can hear these voices before. So it begins with listening. I helped start a program. The proudest thing of my career is helping to start a degree in engagement journalism at CUNY. And our students, some of them have journalism experience, and so they go to a community. Their job is to serve a community for the entire year and a half they're in the program. Pick one community, they're self-defined. And the reflex of the journalists is they get to the community, they pull out the notebook, they pull out the camera, but they quickly realize they put it away. Because first, they have to listen. First, they need to observe. First, they need to empathize and understand. First, they need to reflect back their understanding and their learning to see if they get it right. And then they can start considering how to do journalism together. And that's an exciting opportunity. Just checking my time here. So listening and engagement journalism. And I think what's necessary here in Scranton first is to have some structure and some way to start listening to community needs. And that can be neighborhoods, yes, but it could also be, for example, young parents in Scranton. What are their particular needs? The elderly in Scranton. What are their needs? People who have cancer in Scranton. What are their needs? Sports fans and families. Parents of school-age children, and so on and so on and so on. These are communities of shared interest, need, and circumstance. And to be able to try to understand their needs, and for them to feel heard in that, I think is the first and most important step. So I would love to see a follow-up here with the work of WVIA in trying to help ascertain those needs. In Los Angeles, KPCC, right? 2 C's, 1 P. KPCC Radio, which is the public radio of Southern California, bought a site called LAist, and they recently changed their brand entirely to LAist. And they are now an online first entry. They still have the broadcasting tower as long as that lasts, though I just saw a story in the paper yesterday that someone tore down and stole a 200-foot broadcasting tower of a radio station in Iowa, I think. And I don't think they actually realized it at first, which is the sad part. So as long as you have the broadcast tower, fine, keep broadcasting, but don't presume you're going to have it forever. Don't presume that people are going to be listening that way. Car companies are looking to get rid of AM radio, right? So you've got to serve people in a new way. So understanding the information needs of these communities, I think, is a first step. And I want to hear yours in just a second, but let me do one more thing here, which is to say there's a lot of movements to reinvent journalism. I like to think that I helped start one in engagement journalism at CUNY. I started a program in entrepreneurial journalism. There are other programs called constructive journalism, solutions journalism, dialogue journalism. There's a whole list of them. And you might say it's a bunch of academic BS, and you'd say that fairly. But inside of all those are efforts to rethink what should journalism be? What can it be now? How do we reconsider it? And that's happening within the field, and that's something to tap into. And to say that what Scranton can do is prove the value and the opportunities in engagement journalism or solutions journalism and so on. I'm happy to help define those. Business models. George said this morning, you got the solution? And I said, no. I spent 15 years running a center in entrepreneurial journalism, so I failed. But we explored a lot of business models. And what happened, I think, in the business is that the news industry tried to stick to the top tried and true of what it had, subscriptions and advertising. And when advertising started going down because there was abundance in the marketplace, no, I don't think Craig Newmark killed newspapers. Craig is a friend of mine, and the school I taught in is now named after him, so I'm going to defend Craig. The internet changed the marketplace for advertising. It created abundance, it put buyers and sellers directly together, so advertising was inevitably going to suffer. Subscription, it's a fine and wonderful thing, but not everybody's the New York Times. And people are only going to pay for so much. And if you have all of your news behind a paywall, then the privileged who can afford it get quality news. But what's left out for both citizens and now AI to learn from, but propaganda and lies and disinformation and junk. So we have to think about our responsibility to the larger news ecosystem, information ecosystem here. So I like membership as a model, which public radio loves, but I think that even membership can be expanded with new definitions about how people think of their own affinities, what they belong to. They may belong to WVIA, be very proud of that. There's board members over there who are, and God bless that exists. But maybe I belong to a parents' club. And that's what I feel my affinity to. And WVIA is there to help me, and we're all in it together. That's another form of membership. So what are people's affinities in their communities? Second is, what rewards do we give them for membership? Access to content is subscription. They also want access to community members, access to journalists, access to bargains. There's a lot of different things that people may want in this equation, and it affects how you design the products and services that you then offer people. There's patronage. There's the ability to beg for money. That's what The Guardian does. The Guardian at the end of every story says, "Aren't you ashamed you read this story and you haven't given us money?" And it works. It works. More than 1 million people have been ashamed into giving money to The Guardian. If you go to Patreon, there are journalists now who are making money that way, Substack with newsletters, and so on. Also, obviously, philanthropy. How does WVIA keep its head above water? Generous individuals and foundations. There's commerce, selling things. I convinced my old employer to start selling things, and it turned into a $2 million revenue line in a year. And it also taught them new skills. Government. There's a lot of talk about trying to get government to help pay for news. There's some interesting things happening in New Jersey. There's a consortium. I'll make this quick. Governor Christie sold the licenses of our public broadcasting stations in New Jersey to New York and Philadelphia. We constantly get denuded by your state and the other one. And then was able to sell spectrum to the FCC and made a lot of money for the state to plug his budget holes. But the people in media in the state said, "Whoa, that was our only media. You just sold it and you benefited from it." So after a lot of round and round and round, my friend Chris Daggett runs this consortium now that has given away $11 million from the state. Well, hallelujah, I think that's wonderful. Except, I don't know what the equivalent thing would do in, let's say, Florida or Texas or Oklahoma. So how do you come up with a structure that enables government to be involved in journalism and speech and not be corrupting of it? I'm worried about that. We as journalists should be independent of the politicians we cover, not asking them for favors. What's happening now is there's legislation in Washington and in Sacramento trying to get the government not going to use their own money, but they're trying to hold up the platforms to give the journalists money, which sounds okay, but the money that newspapers had was not given them by God. They lost it in fair competition. And so I'm very nervous about government, but it can happen. One last point on economy, then I'll start talking to all of you, is efficiency. What we do in our field tends to be very inefficient. We rewrite each other. And that's the way we used to have. That used to be time-honored. That's how we established networks for news in this country and a nation, too. When the Postal Act of 1792 was passed, it enabled newspaper publishers to share copies of their newspapers with each other through the mail for free. And the idea behind this was explicitly so that they would share each other's stories, and we would end up with a network of news and thus, again, a nation. I love this part. There was a job title at the time that was scissors editor. And they would cut out articles, and if you look through papers of that time, you would see the same article again and again and again and again. Well, that was the earlier part of the Associated Press. That existed. But it continues today when we don't need that because we have links. All you need is one copy of anything online. But what happens online? Do you all remember that story a few years ago? BuzzFeed did it, where there's this dress and it's 2 colors and people can't agree which colors it is, right? It was a very cute story. BuzzFeed did a fine job on it. Ben Smith, the former editor, wrote in his book, Traffic, it was the biggest traffic day that BuzzFeed ever had. It was a great, fun story. People could argue about it. What color do you think it is? Oh, I think it's this. How could that be, right? I would go to journalism conferences around then, and I would ask people to raise their hands if their organization had written their own version of that story. Every hand would go up. What an effing waste. Every single news organization devoted someone to rewriting BuzzFeed. And BuzzFeed's story was absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong with it. They didn't add anything. There was no Scranton angle. Well, most of Scranton says it's these colors, not those colors. Right? Why would you rewrite that story? Because the business model of old news demanded it. You had to have your own page with your own content to get your own SEO, search engine optimization, your own likes and favorites on Twitter, your own links, your own eyeballs, your own attention, your own ads, and your own pennies from them. And so you find the easiest path to make this thing we call content. And you fill up your publication with it. But are you really serving the public? And are you using this precious journalistic resource, 11 people, properly? Right? That's a precious resource. How does Scranton best put this resource to work? How does Scranton best collaborate with this resource? And I don't just mean WVIA, I mean whoever else is involved in this. How does Scranton make its needs known and help meet those needs? And there are lots of interesting ways to do that. There's one organization I like in Chicago called City Bureau, and a program they have called Documenters, where they train members of the community to go cover meetings. And they pay them for it. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of you get your shoe leather worn down as cub reporters, but imagine what we could do with AI today. I talked to an editor of a big publication in Texas the other day, and he, like many editors, was saying, what do I do about AI? And we started brainstorming, and I said, imagine if you had 100 citizens across the state record a school board meeting in the same week. Then you bring it into AI, which can transcribe it really well, and then you could ask questions of this data. How many of these school boards are talking about banning books? How many of these school boards are instead talking about the mental welfare of their children? What's going on in our schools? No single reporter could do that, but 100 volunteers with a phone could add up to something amazing. I talked to the head of content at KPCC, LAist in LA this week, and I said, what if you took all of the content from all of the diasporic publications in different languages for different ethnic communities and had AI translate it all and load it into a similar database so you could similarly say, what's happening in these communities who are unheard in Los Angeles? You can harness things that exist already. You can encourage people to start new things. You can act as a hub to bring them together and collaborate rather than trying to compete. And you can hope that your community is better off in the end. So on that note, I would love to come around the room. I'll play, I was going to say Oprah, but given my hair, Phil Donahue, and drive the camera guy crazy and run around the room. But I want to hear anything you want to say, because I've talked enough, and here I talked about listening, and I haven't been listened yet. But I also really want to hear what you think are the needs of Scranton in what I will say is a crisis. You've basically lost your newspaper. And you've lost that important hub. You have people who are eager to grow and do more. Help them do it, and help others do it. So anybody, what does Scranton need? It's this horrible moment, nobody puts their hand up. Thank you, the mayor. Wow.
My job. Hi, guys.
Right.
Thank you again for being here. We're very excited to have you. It's great to see everyone, and I think that, yes, it is a crisis. We've been worried. It's one of those things. We knew this day would come someday, and then there it was, and I know exactly where I was standing. Were you there, Kat, when we were? No, it wasn't. Okay. It was actually a press conference that we were doing on August 28th. Was that the day? 23rd, 29th, we were standing there. It was Maggie Nasser and Lori Chesney and I from the Scranton Area Foundation. Chris, you were there.
Right.
And we think, why isn't Jeff here? Where's Jeff Horvath? Where's Jim Lockwood? This is so strange. Why would they? This is a big announcement. And And then Maggie pulled up her phone and said, I think I know why they're not here. So it's one of those moments you knew where you were when you heard about the sale. And already, it was almost immediate, but as the weeks and months have gone on, it's gotten to be less and less coverage of things that we're hoping to get covered. And that's no one's fault, that's no reporter's fault, it's no editor's fault, it's just what it is, and we're trying our best to cover that. Chris Hughes is our new communications director. It took me 4 years, but finally I got one at just the right time in this year's budget. So we're gonna do what we can to get creative, to figure out what communities we can cover, how we get those stories out. But what's so difficult is all of that is online, and right now what we've always dealt with in the city is misinformation on things like Facebook. So we'll continue to innovate ourselves and try to get news out there, but we're gonna need ideas of like you have and those in this room. We're also gonna need your help to help continue to write those letters, whatever form they go into whether it's a newspaper or a WBIA or other platform, something else that's created. We've got to make sure that real, true content, not the misinformation, continues to be out there, whether it's when a meeting is, what a meeting was about, what a program is, what a program isn't. All those things that we used to be able to lean on the Scranton Times for is less and less the case. And so we're very worried about it. We're excited to innovate and hoping that we can really look to the community to be better stewards of their own news diet and that of the people around them, especially their kids, which everyone in this room I think knows that, but we really work hard to make sure that the people around us understand what that means.
So let me keep you on the spot for a second. You can sit if you'd like, but actually the problem is on the mic, I need to get near. Could you hear her at all? Yeah. You could? Oh, okay, good. Okay, fine. So, government is also part of the information ecosystem. And we have things like legal ads, which helped subsidize newspapers for a long time. But there's all kinds of other data and information that a city has. I talked to a business in Norway where they're incredibly innovative around news. A former executive of Schibsted, and he was starting a company that was enabling the city to share more data itself with the ecosystem. So for example, the city administrators said, it's a pain in our rear end when, I'm so conscious of being in a Jesuit school. I have a very bad mouth, I tell you. It's a pain that somebody files for a variance on construction and we don't hear a thing, and then of course when the first hammer hits, then they're screaming at us because they say they didn't know it. Well, they didn't look at what the stuff we put out. So the question is, if you had, besides, you're the PIO? Right, so if you have more than just one person, but you had the ability to build a structure, what is the additional information that the city should share openly online that today it doesn't? Any thoughts?
It's something that we're already working on. Actually, 2 of our team is actually knocking doors right now on Deacon Street because we have legislation that's ready to go to make one block a 2-way for the ice cream shop. And I said, okay, wait. We talked to the neighbors, so we've got people knocking doors today to see if they have an opinion. So it's things like that where we are trying and using our website. I mean, the website 4 years ago was, oh my God. Sometimes we have folks that go to different things, and we do a side-by-side of what the website looked like when we came here and what it looks like now. But we have a lot more that we can do, a lot more information we could put out there. But we need people to go to the website. I think that's part of it too. But we wanted to be sharing more and more on the zoning, more just physically in the neighborhoods, and we've tried to build up that capacity for public outreach too. So going back to the point we forgot how to communicate, we're going back and knocking on more doors, right? People physically to go around neighborhoods and post signs and those things, because I think that's gotten kind of lost. And because of the Scranton Times being what it was, we got pretty lazy over the generations, because we could be, everybody got the newspaper, so that's on us as a government to do more, and a lot of it is more boots on the ground type of solutions in addition to the website.
Thank you. All right, other information needs of the community. What does Scranton need? Yay, thank you.
Paige, I was actually in the woods in Nanaco when that announcement came out. So I'm a member of the WBIA news team, and I think that we all are at this table. So I think one of the things so I grew up in this community. I'm from Scranton. I worked at the Scranton Times for 10 years before I went over to WBIA. I think one of the things that I've found is that people are kind of take what the paper did and what news does maybe for granted, and they don't understand it. They don't understand what a journalist or a reporter does. So a lot of times, like, I think it's like a lack of education about what news is and what news can do. I think, you know, they don't really teach that stuff in school anymore that I'm aware of. Like, I think that if we can get kids and young adults and, you know, people in their early 20s, like, really invested in news and journalism and what it can do for them and their community, especially here in Scranton, because we all, like, you know, Paige said, we always had the newspaper, so everyone, you know, they knew something was gonna be in there. But I think we need to get people thinking about how news helps them from a very early age.
So I'm going to be difficult.
Okay.
We hear a lot of talk about news literacy. Pretty much what you said. If people can be trained to understand better what news is, we'll be better off. If we need a user's manual, I think there's something wrong with our news. And I think that the key to this, the key to what you're asking for, is that the news starts with those people. It starts with the community. It starts with listening to them. And they see how responsive we are. Oh, you have that question. No, I want more questions from you folks about what you need to know, because this is the problem. We kind of sit back and what we're fed, we're fed. But if you go to young people and find out they have a need and then show that you can answer that need, that's an engine that starts over, right? That's listening to a community and seeing what they need. And that, to me, is the proper structure of how to do that. Not necessarily the news we already make, but what is it that they need from us? Now, I'm not talking about focus groups or that kind of inhuman structure, nor necessarily individual interviews. But I would normally say take people out for a beer, but they're kids, so take them out for a soda, as we old folks would say, ice cream, yeah. And just listen to them and see what it is they need to get by every day in their lives and what would be helpful to them. What don't they understand? What do they need to know? If you start there and they see that they've been heard and they see that you've answered their need, that, to me, starts a virtuous circle. Does that make any sense?
Well, so I guess, like, my response to that would be, like, how do you get them to understand that, or not understand, but like, how, like, what am I trying to say here?
How do they know what's possible?
How do they understand what your job is? Or does the job of journalist, does that not hold any power anymore? You know what I mean? Like, do you, like, that skill that you go to school for, that you know, acquire, like, how does that, I mean, at that point, are you kind of useless, I guess, you know?
No. You're still, relax, you're okay, you're okay. Do you have therapy at the station? So, okay, good. Yes, you're still needed, but what I'm trying to argue here is change the job. I'm old, you're not. And yes, you went to school to learn how we did things, but challenge the way we old farts did it. Because oftentimes it wasn't the right way. It wasn't the right structure. Reimagine it. Challenge the whole organization to say, I have a different way to serve people in ways that we couldn't imagine. So part of what you're trying, it's what happened in LA with LAist. They went and they listened to the community about their community needs. They reorganized the entire newsroom and their entire product around those needs. Now, those needs could be in LA, for example, it's transit. They may still be old beats. They may sound like old beats. But what do people need to know about getting around LA unless you have a car, right? And what are the needs of, I'm gonna be bold here. I can see I'm not the only person in this room with white hair. So as a fellow old person, because I am, and this is an older demographic in this city versus others, I want to hear a couple, and I'm gonna start picking on you if you don't answer. I want to hear what you think that older Scrantonians need. With the paper going away, what kind of information do you need in your lives? Any thoughts? I'm going to pick on somebody. I want to pick on you.
Well, you picked the wrong guy. No, I say you picked the wrong guy because I'm a former Times employee.
I know.
I began at the Times on March 13th, 1978. And I left last September 22nd after the sale. I am, this week, the communication director for Lackawanna County. Okay, my first week. We need effective journalism in the county. And it's interesting, it's crazy, jump at the fence to begin with. Like I was answering questions this week for guys I used to work with. It's bizarre, you know. But I know in my brief time on the other side of the fence that every public official in Lackawanna County knows that nobody's looking. It's a very bad thing. On our side of the fence now, the government, as the mayor said, the government has a need to get valid stuff out there, things that people need to know for their own benefit. Because of what's happened, not only at the time, but there's like TV never covered. We're in the process of hiring somebody on the digital side, the equivalent to what I do generally, specifically for that purpose, to fill in where, now, it's not gonna be the same thing, but I think we're gonna have the ability to target audiences, solicit content, and we've already started to do some of that. But the government is a poor substitute for independent journalism, and I've been the first one to say that. So I'm feeling my way in my current job because I have something of an advantage. We were laughing that like my job is easier than that of all of my predecessors in that position because I'm not across the street.
Yeah.
You know, it's not me, but there's nobody like me across the street. Now Joe writes some editorials, but he doesn't do it with the volume. I put out 7 editorial pages and 7 op-ed pages a week for 33 years. Right? That's done.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that on the government side. So I understand what you're saying about community journalism and the roots up instead of the top down. Makes perfect sense, but it's really important for people to watch at the top down too.
And I've heard that, yes. One thing I'll say to both members of government here, now that you are, is not only are journalists not trusted, but neither is government. So an ethic of transparency in government in this time, I'm going to go back to what all can you put out? The spending, meeting transcripts, information that still needs a journalist to look at it, but now you've enabled every member of the community to also look at it. And yes, we can be busybodies. Yes, we can be a pain, but I think you end up with some measure more transparency as a measure of trust from other institutions as well. Cities, counties, schools, and so on. George.
George Lennon, I'm a recovering newspaper man myself. So all my former coworkers. I think the vicious cycle we always got ourselves trapped in was that we always started from the point that we are the newspaper of record with the historical record for the area where we live. So that meant we had to report on Dixon City's Borough Council and Riverside School District, even though it's small and kind of on the edge of our leadership. And only a few people might care about it that day, but we felt we had to because we're the newspaper of record. And as resources diminished, it got harder and harder to cover that. So we were always doing the surveys trying to figure out, well, how do we get more young people? The joke was always, let's look at the obits and see how many readers we lost. Because we weren't getting young people to replace them. And it's a sad story. And then online comes along and we shove it all on there for free and then realize years later, well, news isn't free. It's very expensive to collect it and aggregate it. So let's put a paywall up, but then you're competing with an infinite ecosystem of free information. We thought, like Kat's saying, we had journalists, real journalists, we're verified, we have a code of ethics. We're a company behind it that can be sued if it's fraud or malfeasance or we're seen as attacking somebody inappropriately. They'll sue us, and there's a company standing there that will have to take the lawsuit. Online, you can say whatever you want and get away with it. So your ideas I love the ideas, but we haven't seen any of them work. I'm sorry to be the bad guy again.
Well, I was to you.
When you're talking about LA as they're aggregating, using AI to aggregate all these stories, but of course, here's my next thing up, copyright infringement, right? How do we do that? How do we get their input? And then how do I, as the aggregator, monetize it so that I can keep paying people to collect the news? It's vicious cycles that we were constantly in, and the hardest part, I think to Kat's point, was you can't force civic engagement.
Yeah.
You can't make somebody want to know why there's construction equipment across from the courthouse. Or, you know, I care about crime, but only when it happens in 2 blocks of my house, and I'm not going to read the paper otherwise. That was a problem we faced. So I don't know how to fix it, but I know that we came from the point of the newspaper of, here's what we think you need. Even though we do all the research to think, what do you guys really want? Well, that's great, but we know you have to know what happened in city council. And we know we have to cover all this stuff. So it stretched our resources. And obviously, based on the model, it's not working. I don't have an answer. But I know that from what we tried, you know, there has to be a way to monetize it, aggregate and monetize. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it is, George. And who's? Good. Yes, I don't have we don't have the answer today. But I do think that we have to acknowledge that things are going to be smaller, and we're going to have to figure out how to work together. Is my beginning point. Yes, please.
I'm confessing. I write letters to the editor. On a someone. I didn't ask them to clap, really.
Hold the mic up.
I didn't ask them to clap. Thank you. I guess they've become quite popular, and I don't do them. You know, I'm going to write a letter. The letter writes itself, and I enjoy it, and I'm glad that people like it.
Tell me some of the subjects you've written about. That starts to tell me what you think the needs are. Hold the mic up.
I write about democracy, trying to tell people it's okay, and you know, I write about the non-democracy, and I would say that's the most. You'll know. Is that what I write about? Yeah, I just write it. I don't ask what I'm writing.
So I'll make you laugh. You should be a blogger. You should be a blogger. You can share your opinions with the world and not have to depend on the editors to choose it. Does the paper run letters to the editor still? Yes. Okay. Because it fills space too.
And we always welcome Sandra's because she uses subjects and verbs.
Yeah. Please. Oh, here and here. Oh, I'm sorry. He's answering this, and then we'll come back here.
I'm the managing editor for Scranton Times now, and we run letters.
God bless you.
They fill space, but yeah, thank you. But it's also interaction. It's really
Yes.
direct interaction
Yes.
with readers. So
Yes.
We don't do it to fill space.
No.
Fill space, but it really is the one really immediate way for readers or people in the community to have an interaction. Better than comments online, and their name is on it. We vet them though. It's labor intensive. It should be 2 people working in that department.
Isn't it? There's an irony here, which I know, foot thick. That it used to be that big old media had the voice and the public barely did, but now that you don't have opinion writers, and now that you're having to run opinions from the New York Daily News or whoever, oddly, the journalists have less of a voice now in that space than the public does, and it's less of a conversation. Is my point.
Yeah, we're trying to get 3 editorials a week on that one page that's shared by 4 papers. So and there's an editor in Wilkes-Barre, one in Scranton, one in Pottsville, each hopefully writing an editorial a week. But you know, 2 of us have done it before a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just only so much time, frankly, to do it. Sometimes
Especially now.
A real talk piece, or as one editor's a thumbsucker. Sometimes they just don't put the quality. That Pats were masterful, and I just loved reading them. Did a great job, and we just don't have, frankly, that skill or that time. So,
Yep.
we try.
Can I make another point about letters?
Sure. You guys pass the microphone.
No, I think the point about letters goes to your broader point too. And it's about people wanting to be heard.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't think anybody who ever talked to me as a journalist, either as an editorial writer or as a reporter, expected me to change my mind, but they did want me to listen. And it took me a while to complete, and again, to your point,
Yeah.
you know, I had, especially writing editorials, I had a perspective, and agree to disagree, it took me a little while to understand. He's not trying to change my mind. He just wants me to shut up and listen to him. And I think letters to the
Yeah.
editor go directly
Yes,
to that
yes,
point.
absolutely. You guys figure it out.
I have a different question, and it may be way out.
Well, then hold on one more second. Did you have something to that point directly, or?
I did.
All right, one more time delayed. Then it's back to you. I promise it's yours.
It's okay, we're all friends.
Okay.
I'm Phyllis Reinhardt, and I also write letters to the editor. And I just said to Joe, you said you want to be heard. That's true. But I always strive to impart some knowledge that might not be common, like some little piece of information that most people would not know. And I like to share that in my letters to the editor.
Finally, yes, sir.
Okay. This may seem like it's coming way out of left field, but do you have anything in your department at CUNY that relates to neuropsychology, the way people search for or why they search for certain types of news, how they absorb it, how they process it? The information silos, the overload of information, and how that affects things. It seems like here we're kind of searching in a hit and miss way to reach people rather than analyzing how people can be reached and how things can be, how information can be shared.
I smile because I hope that's next. So I've taught in a journalism school for 18 years. I'm a fake academic. I don't have a PhD. Oh, sorry. All right, I'll turn this way. I'm rude to half the room no matter what. We're a professional school, right? We teach people to write and report and so on and so forth. But I care, and I've started 3 degrees there in entrepreneurial journalism and engagement journalism and executive program. The next thing I want to do, which my dean at the last school didn't like, so I left and I'm going to another school to do it, is to start a program in the internet and humanities. And my argument is that, number one, I'm more interested in larger canvas than just journalism and news, because we now have a networked world. I have another book coming out, I'll plug that when it's not out till the fall, called The Web We Weave, in which I argue that the internet is not a technology, it is a human network. And it's human successes and human failures that we see there. So rather than having people who study machines, we need people who study people. We need the social sciences and humanities involved. So yes, psychology, anthropology, sociology, ethics. George teaches a course, the other George, in ethics and technology. History, civics, community studies, design. These are the skills that I think we need for the future leaders of the internet, which is to say all of our students, because the internet is going to be everywhere alongside AI. So yes, I believe just this. And I went through a lot of research for the new book, The Web We Weave, out this fall. And there's a political psychologist in Denmark named Michael Bong Peterson, who has some really interesting papers arguing that when people when they're sharing divisive, angry stuff, he has a theory that they have a need for chaos. And it's a psychological need. There's other research that says when people are even voting today, they're not necessarily voting for their self-interest, they're voting to send a signal, to say this says something about me and who I belong to and who I don't belong to. Right? These are human foibles that we've got to figure out. That, believe me, we do not teach in journalism school, right? At all. But we need to be the ones. This really goes back to your point, is that if we're really going to teach that kind of media literacy, then we've got to equip people, I think, for those larger questions. And it's not just how they absorb the news, that's my argument, but it's also how they interact with the world and how they interact with each other. And we don't teach that at all, at all. And I think we need to. So, how's my time, George?
Maybe one more question.
One more question, argument, anything?
Positive inclusivity.
Yes. You want to say more?
I think, I don't know where to start. Positive inclusivity. I think there are numbers of people who are not included in what we say and do. And I think we need to get down to the grassroots with those groups that I see. And I'm not talking just about people of color, but that certainly is an area that needs to be examined, given information. WBI does a great job with people like Lisa Mazzarella, I guess, with what she does with Black History Month and Women's Month. How about that? In these days, we're talking about a month where we highlight women.
Half the world.
To me, that's absolutely unbelievable. But I think we need to get down to the level where we not just talk about it, but go into the churches, go into, I attend a couple of churches, don't belong to any of them, but, well, for good reasons.
You're at the place for confession, yes.
The so-called black churches. WBI does such a great job with highlighting composers that just were not given any recognition at all. And those people, whoever they are, don't know anything about it at all, and yet they're highlighted on WBIA. I also attend periodically a couple of churches in the Abingtons that are mainly older people that we just seem to dismiss after a while. So there are groups out there that feel or don't know, and
Yes.
that's all I need.
Yes, thank you. Did I see one more hand down back that way? Okay, one last time. Oh,
I think the original question is, you asked what readers need.
what does Scranton need? Yeah.
From my perspective, what I want is news that's going to make my life better. News that's going to make my community better.
Yep.
And really, whether it's a traffic issue or how taxes are being used, or I don't live in Scranton, or Lackawanna County, but that's what I want. And that goes back to 20 years ago for me in newspapers, Night Raider and news you can use, news to use, we always talk about. And I always try to preach is make it useful for people, and that's what I expect from news.
And let me end with this, if I may. Though might seem to have dismissed the paper in its current form, I don't, and I respect what you're doing to try to hold the ship up and how difficult that is. I've seen it and I know it, and it cannot be easy. And I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
So, I want to thank you all. It has been a wonderful 24 hours in Scranton. I would like to think of myself as an honorary temporary Scrantonian. I feel the steam and the electricity of the place, both at the same time. It's so energizing. I hope to stay in touch, because I would love to see what happens here. We've talked about what's happened to the paper, I think, is in great measure as a unfortunate, tragic action that's happening. And it's not just the fault of any one company or any one person or anything at all. It's the whole field has gone through these pressures. And so it's not just you who needs to figure this out, but you can figure it out helping other cities. You've got an opportunity now, and I keep on pointing to WVIA, to help them help you. And it answers questions like yours. What does that mean? How do we perform the things that are going to make lives better? And people understand that, and we feel like we're in partnership there. And so I wish you all a lot of luck with this, and I'm going back to Jersey. Thank you very much. Thank you.